Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Canto 3, Chapter 11, verses 5 and 6, and number 6 is on the board. Satrareṇu trikam bhuktehe trasareṇu trikam bhuktehe yakalana truti smṛtaḥ satabhagas tu veda syāt tais tribis tu lavasmitaha trasareṇu trikam bhuktehe yakalasa truti smṛtaḥ satabhagas tu veda syāt tais tribis tu lavasmitaha. Someone? I will. Ladies? Anyone else? Okay, so verse number 5, and then we'll read the translation for number 6 and the purport. Verse number 5, the divisions of gross time is calculated as follows. 2 atoms make one double atom, and 3 double atoms make one hexatom. This hexatom is visible in the sunshine which enters through the holes of a window screen. One can clearly see that the hexatom goes up towards the sky. So there's a one-line purport. The atom is described as an invisible particle, but when 6 such atoms combine together, they are called a trasareṇu. And this is visible in the sunshine pouring through the holes of a window screen. Okay, verse number 6, we'll do the word for word. Trasareṇu trikam, combination of 3 hexatoms, bhukte, as they take time to integrate, ya, that which, kala, duration of time, sa, that Truti, by the name Truti, smṛtaḥ is called Satabhaga, 100 Trutis, 2, but Veda, called a Veda, syāt, it so happens, tai, by them, 3b, 3 times, 2, but lava, lava, smṛtaḥ, so called. So continuation with this explanation of the movement of time as it breaks down into its finer and finer particles, and then ultimately comes to the 1 point of a second. The time duration needed for the integration of 3 trasareṇus is called a Truti, and 100 Trutis make 1 Veda. 3 Vedas make 1 lava. You got that? Okay. Don't forget it. Purport. It is calculated that if a second is divided into 1,687.5 parts, Haribol, each part is duration of a Truti, which is the time occupied in the integration of 18 atomic particles. Such a combination of atoms into different bodies creates the calculation of material time. The sun is the central point for calculating all different durations. Om Gyantimirandasya Gyanajana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Maam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadhi Pastyatya Desatarine Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Pevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaho Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. So the movements of time and its different subdivisions in finer and finer and finer and finer subdivisions. We can understand one thing from this, how intricate the material energy is designed. And how that movement of the material energy is also being controlled. As one thing leads to another, it leads to another, leads to another. Bhagavad Gita speaks on the subject of time. So how do we define time? Time is something that brings something about that is not there and then gradually moves it through different stages. It says that time has, the movements of time are divided into 6 categories. And that something comes about, just like we might say, the life of a person. The soul takes a particular body. That the beginning of that body is the beginning of that time element that designates the element of how long that body will stay within the material energy. And then time moves that along. So from there comes growth. From growth comes, it stays for some time, and then it produces some byproducts. Gradually it starts to diminish, to dwindle, and then it vanishes. So this is how time works. It just moves everything along. So everything in this material world is subject to the time element. And who is time? Time is Krishna. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, time I am, destroyer of the worlds. And he also says, I am death, which is another element of the time factor, which ultimately ends the conditioned soul's desire to fulfill their desire for happiness in this material world. So whatever is gained is lost at the time of death, and which is the final element of the time factor for that living entity in that sojourn in the material world in that particular body, and then they start again. So it goes on. Well, how does it apply to devotees? Are devotees under the influence of time? We go through different stages in life also, and then our body will eventually have to leave us after some time. But the effects of time are different for those in the conditioned life or the material life, and those who live for the glorification of the service of the Supreme Lord. The Bhagavatam explains that very clearly in the 2nd canto, 3rd chapter, verse number 17. It says, "By the rising and the setting of the sun, another day is lost, and one is closer to death, except," and then the word except is there, "for those who engage in glorifying the all-good personality of Godhead." So there's the exception, that the time element doesn't affect those who are absorbed in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, or fully engaged in devotional service. Because those who are engaged in devotional service are not under the influence of time. Their body is, but they aren't. The soul has nothing to do with the material energy, and therefore it's not touched by the activities of the material energy, but appears to be because of our identification with the activities of the material world. But ultimately, we can remove that identification when we absorb ourselves in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. And then when the time element comes to its factor of completion for that person's body, then it's not a matter of, to use the word death doesn't apply, it means going from one place to another. And obviously that place is a better place, going elevated towards one's destiny in pure devotional service. Whether it's back home, back to Godhead, or into another birth where one can continue with their devotional service. So for a devotee, there's no such thing as death. For a non-devotee, they fear death completely. I mean, it says in the Shastras also, if you want to be happy in material life, if you want to be successful, that's the actual word, not happy. If you want to be successful in material life, forget about death. Because if you're thinking about death, you can't really be enthusiastic for your material plans. So therefore, for the conditioned souls, they don't want to think about death because it ruins all of their ideas on how to become happy. And of course, it creates this fear that whatever I live for will also be finished in due course of time. And death can happen at any time. And we hear from the Bhagavatam, just like Parikshit Maharaj. I mean, he was a king of the world. He had everything. He had a beautiful, beautiful family, qualified wife, children, obedient. He was a devotee. He was the ruler. He had ministers. He had wealth. He had everything. And all of a sudden, supposedly, he committed an offense to a great sage, and he got cursed by an inexperienced boy, the son of Shamak Rishi, whose name was Shringi, who cursed him. He had that power. It says that the Brahmins in those days had power. And when Maharaj Parikshit heard about it, he didn't think, what should I do? He could have counteracted the curse. It mentions that he had that power because he was a great devotee. But he took the opportunity to now finish up his sojourn in the material world, and he went down to the banks of the river just to fast to death. When all the great sages and saints and from different places heard that this king of the world was actually fasting, they came. So many sages and saints came to witness this great king who is now giving up his life by fasting. But then Sukadeva Goswami was sent by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to give him the opportunity to perfect his life in his last 7 days. So one of the points in this particular thing is that perfection in Krishna consciousness, as Srila Prabhupada said, can happen in 1 second. or it could take many, many, many lifetimes. One moment of pure devotional consciousness is enough to bring the soul, to qualify the soul to go back home, back to Godhead. What does that mean? That means every moment of time is valuable. Prabhupada would sit on his Vyasa-san. I remember it was somewhere in December 1974, I think it was. He was giving a class. It was 7:25 in the morning, and he looked at his watch. He says, "Now it is 7:25 a.m. on December 14th, 1974. And then he waited for 1 minute to pass, and then he said, "Now it's 7:26. Where is 7:25, 1974, December? Gone. You may be a crorepati, you may be, a billionaire, can't buy back that time." So Bhakti Siddhanta, he gives the element. He says, money is valuable, time is precious. Money has some importance because you can do things, you can serve the Lord with that, you can also overcome a lot of problems if you have money. But it's good, but time is more valuable because time goes in one direction. And therefore, every moment of time is valuable. So I think Rameshwar Prabhu could tell us how Prabhupada used every second. When you were with Prabhupada, right, he was using every moment to either glorify Krishna or to make plans to spread Krishna consciousness. He was absorbed. And Prabhupada also knew, because he was elderly, he didn't have much time. So that was also an impetus. But he was using every moment, and that was an example to teach all of us how valuable time is. We shouldn't think, well, I'm young, I got a lot of time, I got this plan, I got that plan, it's going to happen, because, my plans always work. No, I'll tell you a story. It's quite of a sad story. It's an ISKCON preaching story. This happened in Mumbai about 20 years ago. I was personally present. And we were preaching in one college in Mumbai. It was JJ Medical College. And we had set up a little program on campus for the students, and they were coming regularly. And the devotees were giving classes. And it was building nicely. And it was a fairly good, large group of young men who were coming to the classes. And so it was going on quite successful. Even some of them were visiting the temple. So at one point, one of the students, he said to his fellow students, he was coming, he said, I like this Hare Krishna, but I really want to spend the rest of my semester studying. I want to graduate, because it was in his last year. I want to graduate top in my class. Therefore, I'm not coming to any of the classes anymore, but when I graduate, I'll be back. So his fellow students didn't think it was a good idea, but they couldn't change his mind. Anyway, he went away, and he studied, graduated top in the class. In the whole school, he was the best student, medical student. So then, the next day after the graduation, there was a program at the campus. And the students said to they said to their friend, "You said you're going to come back, and devotees are here tonight, so come to the program." He said, "Yeah, but there's a party. There's a party in my honor, so I'm going." So he didn't come. So he was in the party, and he was dancing, and he had a heart attack, died on the floor. 23 years old, no medical history. He just collapsed on the dance floor in the middle of the party. I mean, you think about it, it was quite sad, because he had a great opportunity to practice Krishna consciousness, but he threw it away. And his fellow students, the positive effect was they got really serious. When death sort of comes into your life, you start thinking a little bit differently. I remember, I'll tell you another, if you don't mind me telling stories. I was preaching in Central Jersey, I was in Central Jersey. This is before they had a temple. They had a big hall in Central Jersey. And so they asked me to give a class on the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the difference between the soul and the body. So I was giving class. And there was a long hall. There was at least a couple hundred people were there. In the middle of the class, I was talking about the difference between, what is temporary, what is material, what is life, death, just the dichotomies of material and spiritual. And one man who was sitting in the back, he falls off the chair, collapses on the floor. Right in the middle of my class. And fortunately there was a firehouse next door. So they came with their emergency people, they took the man away. And I had noticed when I was giving my class, people weren't so attentive. But after that incident, I began my class again. Wow. Pin drop silence. Everybody was listening. So yeah, we don't want to wait till such elements just remind us. Because it says that actually there's a statement that says there's two things you should always forget and two things you should always remember. This is from Sri Sampradaya. One of those two things you should always forget, you should forget all of the bad things that other people have done to you. I was giving a class in London one time, and I was talking about Vaishnava etiquette, Vaishnava culture, Vaishnava seva. At the end of the class, I had called for questions, but one lady, she came up to me, she said, I didn't want to ask my question, but can I ask it now? I said, sure. She said, well, I have this problem with this one friend of mine, and she did something to me and I can't forgive her. And I'm trying to forgive her, but I can't. It just keeps bothering me. I said, well, when did it happen? She said, 25 years ago. I fell off my low cushion. Unfortunately, I wasn't sitting too high. I was shocked. The only thing I could say is, you're just killing yourself. Holding that, that negativity within your mind and heart, how can you actually, practice spiritual life and actually live life normally? So this thing this point is that we should learn to forget all the bad things that people have done to you. And another thing we should forget, this might be a little harder, forget all the good things you've done to others. Hare Krishna. We like to do good things to others. This is the nature of Vaishnava. Vaishnava likes to serve, and they like to benefit others by their service. But if we start thinking, I'm everybody's friend, or you start developing this ego about how wonderful you are because you're so helpful, then that also blocks our tendency for actually feelingly taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord and chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So forget about all the good things you've done to others. It's not so important. Just keep doing good things. Or that means keep serving the Vaishnavas. And the two things you should always remember is that one should remember the holy name always. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. And one should always remember that death can happen at any moment. Nobody knows how long. So this time factor, of course, we are under the care of Krishna, and Krishna is organizing the life for his devotees, so everything is under his care. But still, we don't know when he will decide. So therefore, we need to finish up our business in this material world by using every moment we have. And that means becoming very, very focused in our Krishna consciousness, not doing things that are wasting time, or doing something that'll take us away from our Krishna consciousness, because time is, as we have mentioned, the acharyas have mentioned, time is very valuable. And the movements of time, although it's explained here in a very scientific and a very linear way, is very imperceptible. Time moves very imperceptible. It says that time is more like, one of the qualities of time is just keeps moving, and nobody even knows how it's actually moving. Time is not that thing on your wrist that's called a watch. Time is Krishna's energy for bringing about and moving everything. And as Krishna says, that's me. I'm time. So that, but for the non-devotees, it's fearful. For the devotees, it's an opportunity to become more and more fixed in our Krishna consciousness by using every moment that we have to perfect our life. And Bhakti Tirtha Swami wrote a nice book just before he left the world, called Die Before Dying. Die to those things that keep you from dying. What does that mean? That there are our material, whatever material attachments are there, we can't actually welcome death if they're still hanging at the time when the body is about to disappear. So die to whatever they are. They're subtle, they're gross, whatever they are. And the devotee wants to use everything for the service of the Lord. Devotees don't even worry so much about death. They think, well, whatever it comes, it'll come. But let me serve the Lord. Let me serve the Vaishnavas. Let me use every bit of time for that. And then that's perfection in Krishna consciousness. Like that. Here we're hearing something very scientific. Rameshwar Prabhu just kind of prepped me for the class before I sat here. He said, impossible. It is to try to explain these verses. But one thing we can really feel happy about, and maybe we can feel spiritually proud, how wonderful Srimad Bhagavatam is. How it even goes into these subtle scientific aspects of the movements of the material energy, into its finest and most detailed, infinite, the smallest of the smallest movement. It just shows how complete Krishna is in every aspect of his existence, and how everything is so perfectly arranged. It says that there's an example just to illustrate how perfect everything is arranged. There's a story of Sanatana Goswami. He's sitting in front of Manasi Ganga and he's doing his bhajan. Actually, he's writing. I'm sure many have been to Manasi Ganga in Vrindavan area. And he's sitting and he's writing, but there's a problem. He's there in the evening time and the mosquitoes are there. And so he can't really concentrate because the mosquitoes keep bothering him. And right nearby there's a temple, Chakaleshwara Mahadev, Lord Shiva's temple. So Sanatana Goswami is tolerating him, and then one night he's thinking, I'm not going to come back the next night. I'm going to go somewhere else. But Lord Shiva was really happy to see Sanatana Goswami there every night. So he appeared in the form of a brahmana, and he said, my dear Sanatana, please don't leave. Continue to come and do your bhajan here, and I guarantee you, you won't be bothered by mosquitoes. And so Sanatana Goswami took heart, and Lord Shiva went to the demigod that's in charge of mosquitoes. I'd like to know him too, and I'd like to talk to him, because especially in Mayapur, you know, they kind of like me for whatever reason. And he said, keep your mosquitoes away from Sanatana. So he's Mahadev, so they have to listen. So Sanatana went back, and of course every night he was doing his bhajan. And it says, to this day, there's no mosquitoes in that area. Even to this day. So I just wanted to illustrate that point, is how intricate everything is being controlled. We are controlled either by the material energy or by the spiritual energy, depending on where we place our consciousness. We keep our consciousness on Krishna, on devotional service, then we're not under the influence of the material energy. Sometimes devotees, I was just thinking today, sometimes people say, well, devotees, they also suffer like the non-devotees. They have to undergo some physical difficulties, some calamities also. But I was thinking devotees don't suffer, they just get disturbed. They get annoyed, they feel that sometimes these things become like just obstacles. But suffering means when you're attached. If you're attached to something material or something temporary, and that attachment is being challenged or taken away, then there's suffering. The devotees are not attached to anything. We're attached to service. Of course, if we're attached to our body, we're attached to the body because we need the body in order to serve. So you keep the body in good. Srila Prabhupada wanted that. He always would write, hope this meets you in the best of health, your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Prabhupada emphasized his concern for his devotees to keep good health. So we do that. But we also know that the body is temporary, and health will eventually be gone after some time. So we just do our best in that area. And so even if the body is undergoing some difficulty, it's a matter of toleration, it's not a matter of suffering. Devotees don't suffer. They just become bothered, that's all, by these things. Anyway, that's some points we can hear about the time element. There's so much about the time element that is, and for a devotee, time is bringing one closer to Krishna. So time is actually the friend of the devotee because it's moving one closer to Tattva Deham Purna Janmane Naiti Mameti Sorjana, back home, back to Godhead. Okay, I don't know the time, I can't see the clock. What time is it? It's 8:45. If it's 9:45, it's Sarira Vidyajam. It's 8:45. Any comments or questions? Yes, Rameshwar Prabhu.
On behalf of everyone, I want to thank you for taking these up to scientific details and presenting the most wonderful explanation of time, how it affects non-devotees and how it affects devotees. For non-devotees, everything's taken away, and for devotees, it brings them closer to Krishna, and their service, their bhakti that that's never lost. That was brilliant. So I just want to thank you for reminding us that time is everyone's enemy, but for devotees, time is everyone's friend. It's an amazing concept. Thank you.
Provided we stay fixed in Krishna consciousness.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
And then we're assuming that that's the case. Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Malati, please say something.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, that was, before you came, I was looking at the verses and I was thinking, only Chandramauli Swami will be able to present these verses in a way we can understand. So thank you very much. I had a particular experience with Srila Prabhupada in January of '72 when we were having a program in Jaipur at Radha Govind Devji's temple. And at that time, my husband Shamsundar was his secretary, and I was cooking and cleaning. In the morning, he would take a walk, come back, and during the time of the walk, I had to clean the gazebo. He was staying in this gazebo that when you first enter the compound to the right, it's still there. It's a large structure. There may be a fence around it now. But he was staying in that gazebo, and then there was a veranda. So I would cook on the veranda. So he went out on the walk, and I suddenly heard him coming back, and I had just cleaned on the desk. And when I had cleaned the desk, naturally you move things aside to wipe down. And I picked up his fountain pen, and I picked it up from one side, but when I heard those, it came, he's coming, I quickly was putting it down, and I realized I was not putting it in the spot where I had picked it up. But being the foolish, stupid person that I am, I just put it down anyway and rushed back to get the breakfast plate in. He entered the room, he sat down, and he said 3 words, "Who has touched?" Because he reached for his pen and it wasn't where it had been. And it was like I had been punched in the head and the heart, because I realized I had wasted his time. Because you always see Prabhupada, he had a watch on. It wasn't a decoration. He was very precise with his time. If he hadn't been so precise, we wouldn't have the vast library of literature that we have. We wouldn't have the temples that we have. We wouldn't have ISKCON. So I felt really grievous at that moment. And even though I can't say that I don't waste time, I'm a master of that art, I could understand that by not wasting time, we're able to serve Krishna more effectively when that's our goal. And
Thank
Prabhupada
you.
exemplified that.
Thank you. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada is he's teaching us by example. He's also living according to principle, but he's also teaching us also. It's not like, well, that's for Prabhupada, but not for us. It's for us also. Thank you very much, Malati. Yeah. Yes, Rameshwar Prabhu.
Because Malati reminded me to say a Prabhupada story. When I was traveling with Prabhupada, inconceivably, in January of 1977, I was his secretary. And sometimes we were on the train, and he would tell me to take rest. I look back on those days, I never saw Prabhupada take rest. Never. When we got to Kumbh Mela, it was very cold. And my job was, especially at night, we had this heater. I forget the petrol, but the pilot light kept going out. So my job was to just endlessly relight it. Prabhupada was beginning to get ill. This is 1977. The entire week that I was in his tent, he never took rest, not once. It was almost, my perception of it was, Prabhupada saw the illness coming, and he wanted to use every moment to keep writing books. So the whole time he was sick, and I'm in that tent keeping the lighter on, he's dictating books with no rest, no stop. That's how Prabhupada, when he saw maybe he might be leaving soon, it encouraged him to increase even more. It was incredible. Not human, super spiritual. Like a spiritual body. He didn't need sleep.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
To have that opportunity to be with Prabhupada, you're just amazed at how he conducted himself. Completely selfless. Always using every bit of time to push Krishna consciousness on. And they said when Prabhupada talked about how he used to take rest, but devotees say he would just lay back, but he would be always conscious, even when he was supposedly sleeping. Yeah, this is probably that's completely. So we can understand, what the element of what is Krishna consciousness really about. It's about transcending everything material. Of course, when we get free from this material body, then we can experience that. But at least we can, to some degree, we can experience some of that in our own efforts. Just like Prabhupada would say, when you get old, you don't sleep so long in one time. You sleep in just a few hours, maybe a couple of times a day. You sleep 1 or 2 hours, 1 or 2 hours later. And he was talking in general, for us. I guess you know him, Prabhupada would chastise you. Devotees are always wasting time sleeping. I remember 1974, I was in New Vrindavan, and the Kirtananda Swami went to go see Srila Prabhupada, and when he came back, he said, Prabhupada said something that shocked me. And then he said it. He said, the Prabhupada said, out of the 4 bodily activities, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, the worst is oversleeping. We would think it's another one, but Prabhupada said the worst is oversleeping. He said you waste time. Time is so valuable.
I remember once I was sitting in a class with Rupanuga. He was giving the class, so this is my source. And he said that Srila Prabhupada said, not to know the day and the date is another type of insanity.
Not to know what date it is and what day it is.
You heard that.
Is a type of insanity. It's just interesting. I just heard that the other day. Because sometimes I'm thinking, what's today? But whether you forget it or not, it's still insanity. It's a type of insanity. To be aware, Prabhupada's just making the point that we should be conscious of what we're doing, when we're doing it, and how to use the time in the best way to do it. Yeah. Spaced out. Thank you. That's a nice point. Anything else before we end? Okay, yes, Prabhu.
Thank you very much. I would like to request you to repeat that 4 points that you narrated from Sri Sampradaya.
2 things you should always forget, and 2 things you should always remember. It helps to develop the qualities of a Vaishnava when we learn how to forget these 2 things. Because Lord Chaitanya says, Charnadapi sunichena tayori vasuhishna amaninam amanadena. So to forget those things that people have done to you that's caused you some unhappiness, some disturbance. Forgive them. Don't forget it, because if you forget it, you could fall into that again. There's three things: forgive and forget, forgive and don't forget, and work it out. Those are the three options you have when there's some discourse. Basically, that's all. I like forgive and don't forget, because forgiving is there, but if you don't forget, by not forgetting, you don't fall into that same situation again where it can happen. If you forget, you may also fall in that situation again. So try to be, because people make mistakes, they do things wrong, we do things to other people, and we also want to be forgiven. So, and Krishna's forgiving us for all of the things we do wrong also. So this idea of forgiveness is a quality of the Vaishnava. It's actually a Brahminical quality. So just forgive, forget it, and move on. And we like to do things for others that make them happy. We like to serve devotees, and we feel happy when someone is benefited by what we do. But if we keep that in our consciousness, then we start thinking, it's me. It's all about me. And that builds this idea that I'm the doer, I'm everybody's well-wisher. In other words, you start developing this false ego. So these are two things we should forget, and the two things we should always remember, and the word always is there. Always remember Krishna in the form of the holy name, and always remember that death can happen at any moment. There's many stories about that, but because time is ended, I won't bring any more stories, at least for now. But there are so many that the apparent surprise of the appearance of death changes everything in a second. Changes everything in a second. I got some good stories, but I know it's a little late to tell you these stories, but maybe next time. Yes. Interesting. I'll tell you one quick story. There's one devotee he's fighting in the war in the Ukraine, right? So he's a devotee, but he's in the Ukrainian army. It's a quick story. He's trying to preach to his fellow soldiers about being Krishna conscious. They're not interested. There's a bombing attack. They run to the bunkers. He's there with many of his colleagues. A missile comes into the bunker and lands on his shoe, the missile itself, and doesn't go off. All his friends really became favorable to Krishna consciousness. This guy has something. The bomb Naranjan Swami told me this, so I'm not just making this story up. This is, because he was a devotee, Krishna protected him. And the bomb landed on his shoe, and it didn't go off. Hare Krishna. So, remember Krishna. And you're free from all the dangers of this world. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.